This video is sponsored by Squarespace. So, we just started rewatching Stranger Things, seeing as season 5 is out later this year, and also my memory is terrible. I can barely remember anything about what's happened. I need the refresher. Something I'd definitely forgotten was just how good this show really is, and I so wanted to talk about episode 1. That's the only one I've rewatched so far. It does a brilliant job of setting everything in place. Think about this. A roughly 45-minute episode that needs to introduce Mike, Will, Lucas and Dustin, introduce us to Nancy, Barb and Steve, Jonathan, Joyce, Hopper, Eleven, Dr. Brenner, and then we also get to meet like Scott Clark, the teacher, Mike's parents, his little sister, the guy working in the burger joint, 2 bullies. They've also got to familiarise us with the culture of this town, which is actually a key part about what works so well with this story, and that means devoting time to give us a flavour of the school environment, of the police, several different plot lines from Will's disappearance, Nancy and Steve, Eleven looking for food, all the strange stuff we get at the research facility, familiarise us with the 80s setting, and then the many supernatural elements including a weird wall, a boy disappearing beneath a light bulb, and a random girl who can control things with her mind. That's a lot to pack in. Done badly, it's not so much that it would have been confusing, although it definitely could have been, but it's that despite packing so much in, nothing feels rushed here. Nothing feels jarring. Everything comes together seamlessly. It all forms one clear, engaging narrative that progresses very smoothly and leaves me genuinely hooked for episode 2, even though I've already seen this show. We know a lot of shows can struggle with making an episode 1 engaging when there is so much to establish, but it's great here. How do they do it? Let's discuss that now with 3 distinct sections. So the first point is all about the order and build with which all these character introductions progress. It's not uncommon that the first episode of a TV show focuses almost exclusively on the few main characters, and you might get glimpses of other people, but it doesn't really start to build them in until later episodes once you're first familiar enough with the main characters. Well, Stranger Things similarly does start by focusing exclusively on the main few and then later branching out, but it does this in the space of like several minutes rather than an entire episode, and it works because it's brilliantly economical with what it shows, and because it understands there's a lot we don't yet need to know, that it's actually more powerful if we don't. Let's look at the first minute of this show. Okay, actually the second minute, because the first one is this man running down a corridor, getting in an elevator and then disappearing, but that's like a teaser more. After that, 4 kids playing D&D. Mike as the dungeon master is established clearly as the group leader. Dustin is anxious and expects the worst in situations where Lucas is a bit more level-headed and calm. And so, similarly, the 2 bicker over whether to cast Fireball or a protection spell. Dustin is more cautious, Luke is more confident, and Will, who is the one to be casting these spells, is in the middle, stuck, not knowing what to do. That kind of tells us everything we need to know in like 30 seconds. You don't need to explain massive backstories or highlight all of their interests or quirks or all of that stuff you get told to write in character sheets all the time. We don't even need to be clear on their names yet. All we've got is one very vivid feature about each of them. Something that really stands out. What's the hook about this character? And then secondly, a strong sense of why they're friends, they all love D&D, and thirdly, what kind of dynamic they have. And we see this basic dynamic play out again later in the episode.
It's from Lord of the Rings.
Well, The Hobbit.
It doesn't matter.
He asked. The Hobbit.
Shut up. Hey, stop it.
And then again for a third time, with Mike rallying the team to go looking for Will, Lucas being confident and daring to do that, Dustin being more
I
cautious.
think maybe we should go back.
No, we're not going back.
Guys, wait up. Wait up!
You don't want to bombard the viewer with too much initially, you just want each character to feel really distinct and vivid, and sometimes that means zeroing in on 1 or 2 defining features rather than giving you a complete picture. It's taken about a minute, and then Mike's mum opens the door and announces it's time for them to go, while the others are still looking for the dropped dice. Mike tries to persuade his mum to let them play for another 20 minutes, but we learn his mum can be firm, and his dad is not what you'd call an involved parent.
Don't you think that's
I
one woman?
think you should listen to your mother.
But also, actually, his mum isn't that engaged either.
You've been playing for 10 hours?
That, too, is pretty much all we need to know this entire episode. Mike has parents. They're not bad parents, but they're also not very involved. This will later serve as a key motivation for why Mike is keen to go out and do things on his own. Why he doesn't feel like he can rely on his parents, why he doesn't feel like he can rely on adult figures in general.
We can show you if you want.
I said that I know it.
We can help look.
Will then finds the dice, but he rolled a 7, not high enough to cast Fireball, so his character would die in the game. Dustin and Lucas both tell him to pretend he didn't see. Then they walk past Nancy's room and she's on the phone talking about some boy. She slams the door when Dustin tries to offer her pizza, who then complains to the others that she used to be cool but not anymore, which all tells us Nancy is very keen to distance herself from their kind of age group now, which will also be important later in the story. Also, we've got the sense of some vague character called Steve Harrington. They all cycle back home, however, right before Will leaves, he takes an extra moment to confess the dice he rolled was a 7, not the 13 or higher needed to cast Fireball.
It was a 7. The Demogorgon. It got me.
Which is a surprisingly touching moment that sure shows us there is an honest side to Will, but I think most importantly this hints Mike and Will are best friends. That they take that bit longer to talk and reveal something that the others don't and wouldn't say. You know, in reality, taking this extra moment to say that might not reflect that, but it's the impression we're given, and I think this is very important when Will is about to go missing, and Mike is effectively the main character, with the main driving motivation to save him. Arguably you could say Joyce is, but unless I'm misremembering, I think she's less the person to go out hunting, less the active presence in the story, you know? So just this tiny moment establishes their bond for us in a very natural way and a very clear way. It's great. In the short span of Mike running the D&D session, his parents forcing them to wrap it up, and then all of them leaving the house, we now know everything we need to know about all of these characters. Then Will falls off his bike, he's chased by some weird supernatural presence, and then he finally disappears. Roll the credits. Perfect. This is especially clean because this entire prologue takes place at night. The rest of the episode will then pick up the following morning and run for the rest of that day. Prologue sets everything up, shows us the inciting incident, and then we begin fresh with the world kind of waking up to this strange event, slowly discovering that Will is gone.
Boom. Boom. Boom! That didn't come from the troglodytes, no. That came from something else.
The Squarespace offer!
Will, your action! I don't know. Fireball! They'd have to roll a 13 or higher.
Too risky.
Use the code for 10% off.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for you to stand out online. Despite having a YouTube channel, I am not at all tech savvy, and I think Squarespace is a really straightforward option for claiming a domain, building a professional website, growing it, getting paid, all of it happening on the same platform. You sign up, you're given some easy questions to set a clear foundation for how your website might look, which is nice, and then all the freedom in the world to tweak and refine it afterwards. Here's me starting work on a website to sell my stories and to offer my editing services. I love how you can just drag around these blocks. Easy to move blocks that can keep things perfectly aligned. It makes it simple to pop in new stuff, like even making a contact form. You just select it and then look how easy it is to add new boxes here and to customize them. Add extra pages, such as a shop for my poetry books. This is still a work in progress at the moment, but all of this footage you're seeing was just 30 minutes of first trying out Squarespace with not once looking at any tutorials. They can help you secure the best domain names at an all-inclusive price, they have integrated SEO tools to help your website stand out in search engines, and a load of other stuff that you might like. Do you like? Well then there's a link in the description and the pinned comment for a free trial to Squarespace. And if you really like, then use the code MyLittleVautry for 10% off purchasing your domain and website. Give it a go if that's your thing. Squarespace. Hopper. A man is sleeping in his jeans on his sofa and he is late for something, probably work, and yet he very slowly has a smoke. Washes, more smoke, pills, beer. Zero urgency despite clearly being late, and a clear shot that emphasises Hopper is paying little heed to the news. That's it, that's Hopper done. Then we go to Joyce and Jonathan. Joyce has lost her keys and seems fretful searching for them, so in total contrast to Hopper, she is very rushed and very urgent. I think this clear contrast in both these scenes back to back is great because the two of them will become kind of a double act this season, and because of these two moments being contrasted, we know exactly what to expect from their dynamic the very second we first see Joyce at the police station. Also, Jonathan is here making breakfast for him and Will.
Where's Will?
Oh, I didn't get him up yet. He's probably still sleeping.
Jonathan, you have to make sure he's up.
Even before Will's known to be missing, there is a sense of panic. Jonathan's acting calm, but we can tell he's also concerned. Unlike Mike's parents, Joyce is very involved.
That is really unfair, son. We care.
Unlike Nancy to Mike, Jonathan is clearly close to Will, which, isn't to say Mike's parents wouldn't care if he went missing. They obviously would, but in the way we're introduced to them, there is a clear contrast made in how these two sets of families behave, let's say, and that helps to embed them in our minds. Again, it's zeroing in on the most vivid features first, and then you can paint in a lot more of the nuance later on. Plus, it's just great tension because we know Will is missing. They don't yet know that for certain. We now feel tense for when they will find out because we empathise with how much they care. But I'm not going to go through every single character introduction. The wider point I was supposed to be making is this. We are led seamlessly through each of them because it's clear how the characters link. These four people we meet first, they're clearly friends, but then these two branching out of these four are clearly Mike's parents, and then this is clearly his sister, which Dustin clearly feels something about. We get where they fit into the world and the story by virtue of the stuff we've seen preceding their introductions, It's not like we're cutting away to meet Mike's parents separately, or there's a scene with just Nancy and Barb on their own first. No, we're introduced to them by the characters we already know, therefore it's easier and more familiar. Will then gets taken, and okay, we're first introduced to Hopper away from everything else. We don't have context there, but again, we still get exactly how he fits into the story because we see he is a cop, we see his badge. And because we've just gone from a shot of Will disappearing to this one with Hopper, it's very clear to imagine where the story is going here. Okay, this cop is going to be asked to search for Will. If we met Hopper and we weren't shown his badge and his gun, we'd be really confused with what's going on in this scene. Why are you showing us this random man? It would kill the momentum building up from Will's disappearance, or even more so, if we were introduced to Hopper before we saw Will disappear, it would be similarly confusing and jarring. But because of the order and because of the context we have, we can half sense how all of these disparate parts are going to piece together later on. After Hopper, we meet Will's mum and his brother. That makes sense. They're going to press this cop to search for Will. All of the context that's already established gives us a good impression of where things are going, and maybe there will be twists and surprises along the way, you would hope so, but the audience or the reader or whoever needs some sense of where the story might be going. Some vague destination or trajectory in mind. If they don't feel that clearly enough, that's when people often start complaining about pacing, saying it feels too rushed or too slow. Often that's not actually about the speed of the story, it's about how clearly they can follow along with the flow of events and the trajectory of where it might be going. A little side point as well, I love how pretty much everyone in this episode refers to Steve by his full name, Steve Harrington.
Because she's been dating that douchebag Steve Harrington.
Even before we meet him, it's a really nice touch to make him feel like his name precedes him. They don't know him as a friend, it's not, oh that's Steve. No, it's Steve Harrington. Not a friend, but a person everybody knows, a person who's got a bit of a reputation, and we can already envision exactly what that means. The one character where we don't see how she fits is 11, and that's deliberately the case for her specifically. Like, we do get a tiny bit of context. There's a brief shot of a doctor staring at this weird wall that ends with him mentioning the girl, before we then cut to her, so we can guess she's come from this research facility for some reason that is something. But otherwise, it's just a random girl suddenly in the woods, and we go, huh? Okay, I kind of understand where she's come from, but how does she fit into the story? I don't yet know. I guess the weird stuff at the research facility probably has something to do with Will's disappearance, but what's her role going to be? Every other scene we've been shown fits nicely into this vivid tapestry, but 11 is like a wild card here. Something thrown into this otherwise close-knit community, and the fact we don't quite know what to expect from her makes her intriguing in this case. It's tension. But if you did this kind of thing with too many characters, or if you showed us 11 before first establishing everything else so neatly, then it would feel jarring. I think we need the impression of the rest of the town and what this place already is before 11 appears like a bomb to be dropped, Doing that the wrong way round would kill momentum, might even be confusing. And all of this is pretty straightforward stuff, but it is easy to forget in writing. Think about both what features of a character actually need introducing from the beginning, and secondly, the order you introduce the characters. Remember, your audience's brain is going to be sitting there subconsciously putting together some stringboard of everything you show them, so make sure there are dots that can join up easily without great mental strain. The special thing that all of this setup allows for is the rest of the episodes to slowly draw all of these characters together. It's satisfying, it creates momentum, it helps us feel like we're getting somewhere, which is a big part of making sure the audience can envision where things are going. Disparate elements slowly weaving together. Hopper goes to work very uninterested.
Coffee and contemplation. Flow.
Only to find Joyce sitting in his office. We absolutely get the kind of dynamic that's about to unfold. We were shown a lazy cop, then we were shown an anxious parent. We're tuned in, you know? In a later scene, we see Hopper appear at the school, and again we are tuned in. He is going to talk to them about Will. Mike is going to be a leader who takes it most seriously, where Lucas and Dustin are going to bicker, and their bickering is going to annoy Hopper. So, whilst Hopper and Joyce and these kids all began as mostly separate scenes from each other, now they are starting to meet and converge around the idea of Will. And even the more disparate element of Steve and Nancy gets drawn in during a dinner scene. Mike is argumentative because his family aren't taking Will's disappearance seriously. He snaps and mentions Steve Harrington.
You're just pissed off because you want to hang out with Steve.
Steve?
Who is Steve?
Which just draws that plotline in with everything else. Now Mike is annoyed his parents care more about Nancy seeing Steve than they do about Will's disappearance, and Nancy is annoyed her parents care more about her seeing Steve than they do about Will's disappearance. Again, all of this was set up way earlier, but it makes sense as a snapping point that causes Mike to head out on his own and search for Will. My family might not care that much, but my friends do. And he even clocks Steve on his way out, trying to sneak into Nancy's room, which again adds to this feeling of events converging. Even a school teacher, who was just there in the background really, when there's a search party at night, he comes and talks with Hopper about Will, and that binds them together for a moment, even allowing us to learn about Hopper's past. As kind of already said, Eleven's storyline has been almost completely removed from everyone else's. She is the most removed. She's just been with this guy at a burger joint, and we've still been wondering where she factors in. Only at the end, Dr. Brenner and his team appear to capture her. She flees through the forest where we know the kids are, and they bump into each other. Roll the end credits. That's our climactic moment to end on, all paths converging until they literally meet slap bang in the middle where Will first went missing. And it is intriguing because we still don't quite know what will happen with 11, but we've also got enough of a sense that she's probably going to make friends with these kids now. She's also going to have some information or something that might help with finding Will, and they're going to have to hide her from these unknown scary authority figures. We get that, and yeah, you're damn right she's going to end up hiding in the exact basement this story began, in the house of two very uninvolved, slightly oblivious parents. Of course that's what's going to happen. All these different paths converging is just one good trick to give the audience the feel of narrative progression, and it's just naturally satisfying. The feel of everything coming together. You don't need to necessarily do this in one episode. I think in a grander sense, the show does this across the entire season. Nancy, who is currently very keen to distance herself from her younger brother and his dorky friends, her storyline does eventually converge with Mike's when her friend Barb goes missing. And then so does Steve's storyline, and then Joyce and Jonathan join in with them. Joyce and Hopper join up. All of these separate figures in the community largely form into one big team, and it's very satisfying to gradually watch that happen. Here's a quick final point I love. Sometimes introducing you to a character isn't just a case of showing you what they're like. Sometimes it's kind of the opposite, challenging your opinion of what they're like. Hopper is introduced as lazy, uninterested, not particularly serious or professional. When he talks to Joyce, she has to push him to take it seriously, and even then he conducts the search in a very half-assed way. 3 people just walking down the road until he happens to spot the bike. like. And what happens then? He comes back to Joyce's home and something in him has clicked. He is super alert now looking for clues, and he is genuinely quite clever. He's the one who senses Will must have come home. He's the one who heads into the shed and notices the bullets. A new side of him is being revealed, and we can now understand how he became chief. So we were first led to assume Hopper is useless, and now we get to reevaluate our opinion later on, and that's intriguing. Okay, he's lazy and unprofessional, but he can also be quite good? Huh. What's the explanation?
Your daughter, what grade is she? Maybe I'll get her in my class.
No, she lives with her mom in the city.
You know, this isn't the show going, here is what this character's like. It's going, here is one side of them, form your judgments, good. Now we're going to challenge that. Here's now another side. Steve is quite an interesting example. Everything we're told about him presents us with someone who is a bit of a dickhead. He doesn't care about Nancy, he doesn't care about her studies, even when she stresses how important they are. He tries to delay her going to class, he wants to meet up with her after school, and then when her parents find out about Steve, Nancy isn't allowed to leave the house, so he turns up at her window anyway, feigns an interest in helping her study, but quickly has other things on his mind.
How about every time that you get something right, I have to take off an item of clothing, but every time that you get something wrong...
It's not great. However, Nancy does a very good job re-establishing her boundary, which is not an easy thing to do in that scenario. She needs to study, and Steve accepts this. Pulls back and begins reading out cue cards for her again. Even apologises, albeit in a playful way. You know, maybe it is the bare minimum expectation, but I wasn't assuming Steve is the kind of guy who would admit faults, apologise, and then change his behaviour. I wasn't expecting the scene to get dark. I mean, I know from later on that Steve's quite a good character, but I think on a first watch, I wasn't expecting the scene to get dark, but I might have imagined he was going to storm out in a huff or something like that, you know? And you could say he's just adapting his strategy to try a different ploy, but this is where the scene ends, with him reading cue cards, which I think implies this is what they do for the rest of the evening. It's not enough to completely alter our preconceived notions, but it's a nice hint, a nice question now to sit in our minds. Maybe there is something more to Steve underneath. I'm not sure yet, but I am now intrigued to find out. Before, I was just dismissing him as a dickhead side character, now I'm re-evaluating, and that's interesting. Functions then kind of like a very nice minor twist in this episode. Yeah, very well written episode, sets up the entire story perfectly. I am excited to rewatch more of this. And if you like this video, please comment your thoughts. Comment them if you didn't like this video as well, good or bad. I'm here for both. Like the video, dislike the video, I don't know, subscribe. Maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Luke Core, Michael Gallagher, Ben Marie, Thafi, Chad Bramwell, and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.